Welcome to the Blocksi podcast. We're excited to bring you resources for K-12 education and fresh tips on using education technology to make your school life easier. Today, the tips that you're going to be getting are using Blocksi to facilitate and monitor face-to-face and remote learning. And they're from Chris Gutermuth, Instructional Technology Facilitator with the Sycamore Community Schools. Chris has spent 7 years in K-12 education, 13 years as a history teacher, and 14 years integrating instructional technology. So he's got a lot of great information. And today he's going to be sharing some of his tips specifically on using Blocksi, including his one favorite tip of using the assessment lockdown to facilitate secure testing. But I'm going to let him tell you about all of his best practices that they've learned over the evolution of using Blocksi. So Chris, welcome, and we are so excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, thanks so much. I'd like to start with an overview of our evolution with the tool, and it began about 6 or 7 years ago when we went to a one-to-one program. Our district has approximately 5,500 students, and at that time we decided that we would send devices home to our 5th through 12th grade students. And we felt that it would be prudent to provide at-home filtering. So our tech director at that time started looking for various tools, and we found Blocksi. And Blocksi allowed us to send home a device, at that time Chromebooks, with a lockdown browser that then would provide filtering for our at-home students. And the same filtering that we applied at school to those students that used devices when they were on our premises, those same filtering policies could then be extended to the students at home. And we felt that to be prudent. First of all, obviously, there were parents who were concerned about children coming home with a device and what might they be able to get on when they're home. And Blocksi really served the purpose of providing that filtering. We were able to set up the same filters that we had here at school. We integrated it with our Chrome Management Council, which allowed then students to only sign on to that Chromebook with their school credentials. And then Blocksi, being an extension, followed them to that device and then it applied the filters at home. So that was quite helpful because, again, just trying to do our due diligence and trying to keep students from sites that were inappropriate. While at school, that same scenario then followed them when they were at home. What we also found, and this wasn't really the concern at that point, but a byproduct of that was then providing data and analytics behind the scenes in the administrative council of Blocksi, which allowed us to go in and then glean information about sites, about places where students were visiting, maybe where they shouldn't visit. And we were able then to tweak our filters to make it more secure and to keep students in a more safe environment. It also allowed for monitoring, which initially, as I said, we were really more concerned about filtering, but monitoring was also an important consideration once we realized the tool allowed that. So there were times when we were asked by teachers or administrators or even our school resource officers that were conducting investigations that could have been regarding bullying or inappropriate use. Blocksi allowed us to go in and check histories of individual students to figure out where they had been and what they had accessed. There were times, as I said, teachers would ask technology if they could check where a student was at a certain day and time, and those histories were kept. And we were able to go in and be very specific, what videos were viewed, what sites were accessed. We would have at times parents that would call and say, we're hearing that students are able to. And we were able to go in and be much more intentional about keeping students from specific content that we knew was inappropriate, but we really didn't know that they were accessing it. We found holes in our filters. And by having that data and those analytics available to us, we were able to actually plug a lot of those filtering holes that we had. Another byproduct of the tool was what's called the parent dashboard. And this was very effective in our one-to-one program because parents oftentimes, when we would send the device home, even though it was being filtered, parents would oftentimes say, well, I still do not want my child accessing these sites or these videos. And they may have been very appropriate in terms of curriculum, or they might not have been locked or blocked down. And again, appropriate, but maybe the parent just didn't see it was timely when that device was at home. Well, the parent dashboard, which was an extension of the tool that we purchased, it cost the parent nothing because we had purchased the suite of the software. We were able then to tell the parents, if you would like to have greater control over time blocks or site access, parents could go in and apply for an account. We would then go in and we would confirm that that parent was the parent of the particular student. They were granted access, and it's very simple, especially on the school side of it, very simple to facilitate. The parent then was able then, or is able, to sign into Blocksi. They can see then the students' online visitations and habits. They could go in and lock down certain applications such as gaming or YouTube. They could block certain websites, and they could also then monitor by viewing histories of where the student had been visiting. And again, it wasn't necessarily parents going in and applying filtering above ours that may have been because we didn't block it ourselves if it was inappropriate, but it was giving the parent even greater control. So if a parent wanted to block online access from, say, midnight to 6 a.m. in the morning, they could do that. And those parents' controls did not override the at-school controls. So once they left campus, parents had more control over the filtering and the monitoring. And then when they came back to campus, our filters would continue to function without any parent involvement in that. And that was great because we were able to really empower the parent. And instead of the parent constantly saying, well, can you block this or can you block that when the child's at home, we could turn around and say, we have the tool for you, and it will empower you as the parent to have more oversight and more control. So that was another win for us. Beyond that, we then evolved into what's called the teacher dashboard. So we went from simple at-home filtering to a parent dashboard. We had the analytics and the monitoring capabilities, but then there's the teacher dashboard. That was the next step. The teacher dashboard allowed us to integrate all of our teachers into Blocksi, and then it automatically created accounts for each of our teachers. The teacher dashboard then allowed the teacher to sign in and to create classes for each of their sections or bells of students, much like what you would see in a Google Classroom environment, where they would sign into the tool, they would have their teacher dashboard, and then they would have each of their classes. What this allowed them to do was then to go in and open a class and start Blocksi, and that provided them a dashboard where it showed a tile of every one of their students in the class, and it would show their actual desktop and every tab that the student had open. So the teacher could open Blocksi, they could see exactly what the student was doing, they could close tabs, they could restrict tabs, and they could be much more involved in viewing what the student was doing. At the time when we were strictly face-to-face, that proved to be a valuable tool. to keep students more engaged in the lesson at hand. But in remote learning, the same function is active, and our remote teachers, our virtual teachers, have the same ability now to teach those students who are at home, but yet to actively view and monitor student involvement on their desktops, their Chromebooks while they're at home. Now, this all sounds rather punitive and restrictive, and it can be. If students are doing something inappropriate, I can lock that site. If students are not engaged, or if I need to get the students' attention, I could easily stop what they're doing on their Chromebooks and immediately get their attention. So yeah, there is some restrictive components of that, but yet it's also very effective in pedagogy, in terms of teaching and providing access to resources. For instance, if I'm teaching, whether it's with a remote group of students or whether it's face-to-face, I can easily, through Blocksi, send students immediate links that open up tabs directly on their desktops, on their Chromebooks. So for instance, if I'm studying ancient Egypt or a particular math topic, I could go in, find a video, I could then send that directly to the students. It would open up an additional tab on their Chromebook, and I could then tell the students, when you have an opportunity, here's a website I think will be very helpful to you. It's a great resource, and when you have that opportunity, take a look at it. I could also send them a resource which would lock them into that, and that would be the only thing they could open at the time. So if I'm talking about a particular concept in the area of science, I could say, now here's the site we're looking at today, and I could push that URL to them. It would put them right into that site and that site alone. Again, trying to keep kids more focused, more engaged. So the benefit, not just in monitoring, but also for the facilitation of resources that I can provide to students. It also has the ability to provide lockdown browsing and more of that secure testing environment. I'm finding that to be a demand by many of our teachers, especially in remote learning. So if I have students at home and I have a particular assessment, and again, it could be in different platforms. It could be in Schoology, it could be in Blackboard, it could be in Google Classroom and Forms and so forth. I could create these various lockdown configurations that would only allow the student to get into those assessments that I have made available to them. So that's been quite helpful in test security. Again, this whole, I guess, evolution of where we've come in the last 6 years, we've grown very much with the product, but it provides for various aspects of what we have found to be very needed, whether it's been just filtering, whether it's been monitoring, whether it's been analytics, whether it has been providing for parent empowerment, whether it has been for engaging the student through the teacher dashboard, or whether it's to be monitoring through the teacher. All those various aspects of the tool can be applied one without the other, but having them all and being able to grow with that product has been extremely helpful for us here at Sycamore Schools in Cincinnati.
That's some really helpful information, because I think even just, as you mentioned, you've been using this for about 6 years. When my youngest was graduating high school, it was just when they were actually allowing technology in the classroom. You could bring a computer. Usually you brought your own computer still at that point to the classes that needed it. And then shortly after that, some of the schools started providing the computers. And at that point, I just imagined, I had volunteered in the schools a lot, never teaching a class. I'm not a teacher, doing some lesson type activities. And it was hard enough to get the kids to pay attention when you're standing at the front of the classroom and there's no computers. And I could just imagine how difficult it could be if every child had a computer on their desk and you don't know if they're just playing solitaire or visiting a site they shouldn't, if they're on an email or messaging program and just doing the new version of passing notes. And that capability, I'm so glad that it's available to allow teachers to quickly see what's going on When no computers are there, you can see what's happening on top of the desk.
Well, that's a very good point. When we first rolled this out, the teacher dashboard of it, I would hear teachers say, this is a game changer. Because, like you said, as a teacher, I can't be at everyone's desk. And as a teacher, depending on sort of the configuration of the mode in which you're teaching, I know in the elementary levels, there's a lot of station rotation. If I'm working as a teacher at a particular station and I'm doing a small group and I have other students, and this is taking place in our elementary schools every day. If I have a group of students in the corner doing one thing on their computers and I have another group over on the other side of the class and I'm trying to facilitate 3 students up here because I'm differentiating for those students and I need them in a small group, the ability to have Blocksi sitting there just open on my workstation or on my teacher PC or Chromebook, whatever I have, the ability just to be able to glance to ensure that those students are on task, to make sure that they are appropriately using the time. It's so simple, but yet it's so valuable just to have the ability to see that. And I think that's where the teachers have really gained appreciation of that. We're finding too that in the remote or virtual classroom now, the opportunity to have an additional teacher that's monitoring students too. So if I am in a class where I have a special education teacher that's responsible for a number of students to provide intervention and assistance, the ability for that teacher to have access to those students where they can be monitoring and providing information and providing resources. Blocksi has a comment or a messaging tool that has been quite helpful too. So I know there are some video conferencing tools that provide chat, but they don't have private chatting. So we have teachers now that are using a video conference platform to engage our virtual students, but they're running Blocksi on another monitor where then they can do back channel messaging to individual students. So you're not divulging any privacy issues, you're engaging that student, you're keeping it private between the student. So something as simple as just that messaging tool has been extremely helpful. Blocksi also has in the teacher dashboard the ability to do breakout groups. And it's now evolving to its own video conferencing tool. So initially, and again, the tool has evolved with us. We have evolved with the tool to the point now where it's blending in video conferencing tools, much like what you would see with Google Meet or Blackboard Collaborate or Zoom. Blocksi now has that incorporated into the teacher dashboard where now you can do conferencing right within Blocksi. With that particular capability, one would not even need to have multiple platforms to engage students in video conferencing like we're doing now, but also then to see, well, what are you doing on your desktop? Wow, we are engaged in what you're supposed to be doing. Or how I can quickly share or open a tab or go into a test mode. It's pretty impressive what really the capabilities are. And another nice thing too that I've found over our 5 to 6 year relationship with Blocksi is I don't consider it that we purchased a product. I really feel like we've gained a partnership in terms of our evolution and Blocksi's support for our needs. Blocksi has always been very assistive and very responsive, whether it's been our misunderstandings or our inabilities to engage in certain filtering parameters, the ability for us to contact Blocksi and they step in and help us to make adjustments to our filtering, or whether it's my misunderstandings about how certain features might work or how they're supposed to work. The support folks have been extremely helpful in helping us employ the tool and to really gain the greatest advantage from it.
I like that point because I think a lot of times whenever you buy a software product, you don't always feel, I know I don't always feel like I should be contacting support. It's like, well, I have the tool. It has instructions. I learned the basics of how to use it, and I wouldn't stop and think that I could call up the support and kind of get more of a personalized assistance to the level that you have. And so it's really helpful, especially when you're talking a school district with thousands of students and somewhat unique needs. That ability to kind of have a personalized touch is
Oh,
invaluable
it is
right there.
invaluable. Yes, it is. And I will say too, I know that in education, and I'm assuming others feel the same way, we tend to jump around to the newest and best. And now I've been doing this for many years. It's just this constant evolve or constant rolling over of tool after tool after tool, different platforms and the newest and the greatest. And as I look back and look at the investments that we make in education, and I feel that oftentimes we don't really fully develop the tools that we often purchase and we move on. And I feel like Blocksi is something we never moved on from, we just continued to evolve with. It's gratifying to finally take something and actually now look back 5, 6, 7 years and say, gee, we did it right. We learned the product, we've applied the product, and we're still growing with it and integrating it deeper and deeper. And I feel like we made a sound investment and have utilized our resources in a product and a platform that we've done so responsibly. And we're getting, a bang for the buck, if you will. So I'm proud of that.
I like how it becomes kind of, I think the word synergy is sometimes overused, but it really can become that. And I would imagine that your teachers are pretty thankful that you're not changing technology on them every year.
Well, the problem with that is sometimes in education, we have aligned ourselves with our outcomes in the sense that we've conditioned oftentimes our teachers to feel that very same thing. And that is, well, I'm not going to engage in this because this will change or this will pass. With how we've done Blocksi, I don't think we've created that sort of response from our teachers. I feel like they feel like this is a tool we have and it's not going anywhere. And they can then engage and take ownership of that particular product and hopefully feel comfortable growing with it, because I feel like we've been good stewards in terms of what we've done on the curriculum and technology side of it and how we've implemented it.
I don't think anyone at the end of 2019 could have expected what would happen to schools needing to suddenly switch to remote learning in 2020. And then some of them have switched back and then switched back again. And, because COVID is changing every day, there's been a little bit of back and forth on whether you're going to be remote, you're going to be face-to-face. Sometimes it's a mix. As you said, you have some of both going on. So what is your best tip for schools that may just now be implementing some of this remote classroom management pieces to be able to make that shift back and forth effectively?
That's a good question. Obviously, the video conferencing piece has become extremely important. And again, whether you're using Zoom or Google Meet, whatever, I mean, that's an extremely important component. Again, Blocksi has incorporated that now in their tool. But even if you're not using the Blocksi's video conferencing tool, still the ability to engage and monitor students, whether they're in face-to-face or whether they're remote, is still extremely important and effective. And I think that's what we've seen here. We have some students that are face-to-face and they may then go remote or vice versa, or we've been in situations here where we've had to be out for extended periods of time. So whether you're in face-to-face or whether you're remote, Blocksi has been able to help us in delivering instruction and to hopefully better engage our students. I just think that's invaluable. I mean, you hear people all the time, our virtual teachers, just in a virtual classroom environment where students aren't visible. Mandating that students keep their cameras on is not easy. So there are those occasions when you will hear teachers, "Johnny, are you there?" So just video conferencing wise, whether you're in a Zoom meeting or whatever, you don't even know if the student's engaged. But with Blocksi, you can see what the student is doing on that desktop. You can see if they are engaged. You can see histories of use, and teachers have the ability to do that also. You can take attendance through Blocksi now, where it's very easy to go in and do an attendance and get a report on attendance. You can go in and you can look at usage for your classes. It really does provide you with the analytics and the data and the abilities to, I think, better engage the student. It's just a great tool.
And we all know that when you're more engaged, you learn better and easier. And even thinking, I work with businesses a lot. And even when I try to do now like remote sessions, I have the same issue. They're adults, but their camera's off. They may not even be sitting at the computer anymore. But we can't really expect elementary age kids to have that better attention span than we can even do as adults. It's just not possible. You had mentioned some of the analytics and reporting, and I know that there's reporting for teachers can access analytics. You mentioned parents can, and of course, you're reporting on your back end. But what have been some of the most helpful analytics that you've found for any of the groups?
I will say something that we've had to do recently because of remote learning, and that goes back to the attendance policies. I never really thought this would be something in which Blocksi could be helpful. We have to take attendance in remote learning. We have students that, we will take a daily attendance, and we're trying to apply a face-to-face environment to a remote scenario. And it doesn't really transition well or translate well. But we're still doing daily attendance, even for remote learning. And we will mark children absent. And now people are coming to me because I am able to glean analytics from Blocksi, and our attendance officer in this particular building will come and say, I'm showing this student being absent for all these days. Can you check to see if this be the case? And I'm like, yeah, I can go into Blocksi and I can look at a particular date for one child and just take a quick look at the log for everything that child did during the course of that day, or whether month or week. And I've been able to go in and look and see, well, this child's been marked absent for all these days because they weren't in this one class at 9 o'clock. But the log is clearly showing that over the course of from 8 to 2 in the afternoon, the child is in Google Meet, the child is in Google Classroom, the child is on these instructional videos. So it would be a misnomer to tell the parent the child's not here all day. The child may not have been present at the time they took the daily attendance, so there's an issue there. But to say the child's not present, Blocksi is clearly showing that child is being engaged at various points of the day. So that's a byproduct I never thought that we would ever come to. It's something simple, but having that tool has allowed us to do that.
Any other ways that you've used Blocksi that either you didn't think you would, or that are most helpful in you doing your job?
Well, my job's a little unique in that, I work with the teachers in terms of technology integration and curriculum. And so I have a lot of involvement in the back end of these various tools. So from my perspective, some of the things I never thought I would be involved in would be, working with a school resource officer in terms of, we have concerns about what this child may have been doing. The ability to go in and look very specifically at, a child's history, and to find that, yeah, they're trying to access these sorts of tools, which could be harmful, obviously, to the child. And to be able to report that to a school resource officer, to an administrator, to a parent, that, we have these concerns, and that information behind the scenes that this is collecting has been very helpful. Examples too, where, you think that you have, especially for our younger children, you think that, you send this device home, or these children have access to these devices at school, and you think, well, we've got everything covered. There's no way they're getting to inappropriate content. But the ability, to go in and look and see what Johnny did access something he shouldn't have, and to be able to call the student in, and that, not for just punitive purposes, but the ability to come in and say, Johnny, this was not appropriate. You understand this. But then to actually say, how did you do this? It's clear that you were able to get to something you shouldn't have. We, on our end of things, thought that it was completely impossible. So what do we need to do here to fix this? And to kind of turn the situation around and sort of garner help from a student who was being inappropriate, but yet to have that teachable moment to explain, you can't be doing this, but now can you help us to, fix this situation? I never thought that would be the case, but, you see those sorts of scenarios too.
And they'll find a way to get around any of it. I remember seeing a meme someone had posted of students in their Zoom class, and one of the 7-year-old kids had figured out they could do a screenshot of them on the camera and then set it as their background, and they could go off and play Xbox or whatever. And had they had something like Blocksi, they could have seen very quickly by looking at the desktop of the student that nothing was going on. And I'm like, how can a 7-year-old figure that out when, plenty of adults can't even figure that out? So yeah, it always amazes me how they will find a way to get around pretty much anything you put in place.
Yes, filtering is not a perfect science, and they will find ways around it. And the tool helps, it really does provide insights to help circumvent some of that. But it's ongoing. I mean, everything, it's a constant battle there. But I don't know what we would do without that capability. I mean, it really provides us the insights that we really need to, I think, do this effectively. And I think, by law too, we're responsible for child safety. Funding is contingent upon the ability for us to do our due diligence. And this tool has allowed us to do that.
Outside of Blocksi, which we love that you love it, what's your other favorite tech tool to do your job or help your teachers do their jobs best?
I guess any sort of video conferencing platform. I mean, a lot of people are using Zoom now, or Google Classroom, or Blackboard Collaborate. I mean, there's a plethora. They all do much the same thing. But I mean, on my side of things, trying to help teachers utilize these tools now for engagement, that's the big question now. How do you effectively engage students in remote learning that doesn't take us backwards? We were moving ahead and evolving our teaching to try to become more project-based, to be more engaging, more innovative, to be more hands-on, to be more collaborative. And all of a sudden, we're in this remote environment where I felt like, we had to kind of almost scramble to survive. And we became then again much more, I think, teacher-centered and much more, I guess, lecture-based, even in that remote environment where I'm on, like we're doing now. I'm sort of the center of focus here. People watching this are doing much of nothing but just listening. And we learned, the last many years that in the regular classroom, in the face-to-face classroom environment, that's not good teaching. I mean, there's a place for that teacher-centered approach. But if that's the way you're conducting that classroom day in and day out, every minute of the class session, then it's probably not very engaging. And that's why we're now trying to help teachers better use these tools, whether it's Blocksi or video conferencing tools or assessment tools, to really make it more student-centered again. And there's ways of doing that. That's kind of the ongoing challenge.
Always the challenge with technology. High tech, you need high touch, and how can you make that happen? I'd like you now to share how any of our audience can contact you if they'd like to get your input on Blocksi or other education technology.
Right, Sycamore Community Schools in Cincinnati, Ohio, and probably the easiest way to contact me would be through my email account, and that would be Gutermuth. It's Gutermuthc, Gutermuthc at Sycamore Schools, that's plural.org. So Gutermuthc at sycamoreschools.org. And again, here at Sycamore Community Schools in Cincinnati, Ohio. So if you do have any questions about any of these tools or any other types of questions, please reach out. I'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on our podcast today and sharing your wealth of knowledge about Blocksi and education technology in general. And we wish all of the students at your school good, engaging learning that's in a safe environment, which it sounds like you are right on top of. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.